All right. I think I can get started at least with the beginning introductions and whatnot. All right. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here and being interested in joining us for these important and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. You will see that this is being recorded, and if you didn't see, well, I'm telling you now that this is being recorded. We do put the recording on our Allegany County Library YouTube, normally within a day or two, just so that anyone who may have missed it can view it, and anyone who wants to revisit it. We do have some students who use the recordings, so we also hope that the recordings can be used to engage and prompt others to have these discussions as well. If you missed it last time, we did address that we had received some feedback on one of the previous discussions that we had made it an unsafe space here for some of the BIPOC that were attending. And part of being an ally and part of these discussions is learning and growing and unlearning racist behavior. And it is recognizing when harm has been done and taking action to be better. It means uplifting and amplifying BIPOC voices. And so we did get some feedback and we decided to kind of create some guidelines moving forward. So we hope that you understand. We know that for those in attendance, we know that for some of these discussions and stories, it might be shocking and new to some of us, and it kind of seems like an automatic response to say, but please keep in mind that for many others possibly here amongst our peers and in America, that this is not a new experience, and this is very much a lived experience. With that, we don't know who is in attendance, and we do have to acknowledge that we may be missing a very vital perspective of this discussion, which is Black men to discuss their own experiences and outlooks. We have Bryan Stevenson's outlook, and we can base our answers around the lens of his experience and his own answers. So I'm going to quickly share some guidelines that we hope that you understand. And where is my screen sharing? Okay. Please stay muted until it is your turn to speak. We also ask that you use the chat to ask if you would like to speak. That's way the moderators will be able to create a speaking order. We're not using the raise hand feature, mostly because we have trouble seeing it, and it seems to change where it's located on Zoom a good bit. It's kind of hard to find at times. So we do encourage discussion in chat for those who are not comfortable on camera or who don't have time to share. We also ask that you please keep your answer to around 3 minutes, just to ensure that everyone has time to speak. We do have a smaller group tonight, so that shouldn't be a problem, but we will see. If you haven't read the book, we encourage you to stay and listen, but refrain from entering this discussion without having the full context of the book to put answers in. And moderators may interrupt you. Please just respect their choices as we're trying to maintain a safe space with the discussion and moving forward and trying to keep things on topic. And there are going to be times of silence, and this is good. Just use that time to consider your own answer if needed and reconsider given the perspective of the book and how racial injustice might play a part into your answer. There are a few other things quickly. The Book Center in downtown Cumberland is holding a Just Mercy discussion on April 14th at 6 p.m. Anyone who is interested in joining further discussion or who maybe wants to attend an unrecorded discussion, you can attend that. ACM is also having a virtual event on April 19th, and I'm going to go ahead and share that, and it's actually with Anthony Ray Hinton, and if you've read to the end of this book, you will have seen him mentioned. And I put a link to the event in chat, and I've lost my notes. But he's going to be doing an event about his book, The Sun Does Shine, How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row. So if you're interested in that, the link is going to be in chat. I do want to quickly thank our partners as well, True Civility Leadership Allegany Alumni and NAACP Branch 7007 for helping making these discussions possible and for coming together to make these discussions a success. We've greatly appreciated their feedback through all of this. Renee Mason is here with True Civility tonight, and I also have Sarah Welsh with ACPS and NAACP as well. If you want to introduce yourself, Sarah.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I wanted to mention also the essay contest. For those of you who have been here before, I think almost everybody has. This is just a reminder that if you have connections to high school students who are, any high school students in Allegany County Public Schools are eligible to enter the essay contest. It is hosted by the Equal Justice Initiative and Bryan Stevenson's work, focused around all the issues that this book presents, and it's a great opportunity to dig into, to this work deeper for young people. And it's also a pretty significant scholarship that they're offering. So it's a great way to to get involved with the truth and reconciliation piece of this work that's hosted by our local organization, the Allegany County Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Group. And I see that we do have another member here from that group, Annie. She's with us, and if she wants to say anything about allyship, not putting you on the spot, Annie, but if there's anything that you want to pop in and speak about that work as we move forward to you.
If not, I have Hillary, who can give us a little more information on the Anthony Ray Hinton presentation as well.
Hi guys, my name is Hillary Custer, and I am actually one of the students in the Human Service program this year, helping with this event. We just released the link today on the flyer. You have to pre-register if you would like to attend. The link is on the flyer. All you have to do is you would register like you did for this event. So click the link and put your name, and I'm hoping it's going to be a great time. And also there was a thing on Amanda Mangan the other day.
Thank you for sharing that, Hillary. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
If there are any other partners or moderators in attendance that I may have missed, please feel free to introduce yourself. I've been trying to keep up with who's here. If not, we can go ahead and get into the questions. Okay. All right. Question 1. When scrutinizing injustices, we often look at discriminatory and unjust laws. As Stevenson says, though, he handled more cases and saw the myriad ways that things could go wrong. What other factors can contribute to injustices, and consider some of the examples Stevenson gives throughout the book? So I think that we see obviously that there are a variety of ways that things can go wrong inside of the courtroom, especially when it came to lawyers and doctors, apparently. But one thing that I didn't consider, and I felt so ignorant when it hit me, especially in the digital age, was the media. I never considered media being lumped in with injustices. Sometimes I forget that biased news in media like isn't a new thing. This has been around for years. And I think we definitely saw with Walter's case, he was villainified by the local news outlets to the point where even like the new DA didn't even want to consider hearing a new trial or reopen the trial because he basically believed everything that was going around. It's just how many times do we not only just blindly believe what we're reading, but how much information is being excluded from what we're seeing. As we saw, there was a lot of parts to Walter's case that were excluded until years and years later. And Bryan Stevenson even admits that the coverage rarely helps his clients. And I think we could see that. And not just with Walter's case. I think he mentions with the civil rights movement, courts were ruling in the favor of defamation when it came to like politicians suing media outlets and news outlets whenever they were talking about civil rights and trying to kind of turn it into something more malicious. And I don't know why this didn't cross my mind, as we are living in quite the news age where I think a lot more of us are seeing more of these issues and double checking the things that we're reading, and we're looking into the sources, and the contempt for the press is just growing. So I didn't even consider that as something that would fall into adding to injustices, and it's something that I consume every day. And I think that hit me, like that part. I was like, this is so true. I don't know how I didn't fit this in. I never saw this as part of the puzzle, because when you think injustices, you're thinking lawyers and courts and judges. So I think that was one of the parts that I hadn't fully considered before. And did anyone put the question in chat? I can put the question in chat. Is there anyone else who would like to add to it? I can think of a few more.
Well, another injustice is the mentally disabled. The injustice of not acknowledging that there are those issues and they're not brought forth during the trial. And I also would say that following up with the media, the opportunity for significant injustice seems to be developing with these new media stations. And I think that's very concerning, because they're just full out, whatever they want to say, be it true or not. I don't know what can be done about that from a mass population to fix that that problem that looks like it's coming up.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will come down to educating and being, more aware. I think I've always been taught to double check sources, but there's a lot of people who aren't taught that. So I think a lot of it does come down to being aware that it's happening and knowing how to fact check in the long run. And that's not a skill. That's not a skill that's taught a lot.
That, right? Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, thank you. I thought Sarah was going to go next. That's fine.
Oh.
I can wait till after Sarah.
Sure, yeah, no problem. I was also going to respond to the idea of the media. I think there are a couple interesting things there. One is I think it taps into the idea of the that at some point things were different, you know, that there was a time when the misconception that there was a time when there wasn't bias everywhere, you know, and that it somehow has gotten worse over time instead of better, or that it you know, that there's been some sort of difference. But yeah, absolutely. It's just, that's not what we've done is look at it through that, you know, through the white lens of that there was this time when there were a couple of news channels and you know, Walter Cronkite is telling everyone, so, you know, it's got to be true kind of thing, but it's still skewed, of course. And it's a double-edged sword of that. There's so many things that from the civil rights era that were positives because they were, yeah, I mean, that was really Martin Luther King's strategy, right? To get exposure, to see, so that people can, outside of the communities, you know, specific communities, but that was happening in the North and the South, that was everywhere. But the, you know, the idea that there's exposure outside of you know, individual communities to see how expansive and how systemic and problematic the you know, issues were, and how far people were willing to go to stand up to make a change. But the other piece of that, you know, comes with exactly all the stuff that Stevenson is mentioning in this post-civil rights era, where the same sort of mechanisms are then being turned to use, you know, to be used against his clients. You know, there's really specific examples of ways in which they're really hung out to dry, even more beyond the courtroom, you know, beyond all of the injustices of the courtroom, just with being tried in the media. You know, that's something that we hear quite a bit.
Yeah, it has its definite pros and cons, and whoever's wielding it.
Should I go now?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, thank you. I was also thinking with the media in this case, it was interesting that by the time this story got to 60 Minutes, it had a little different perspective. So I was able to look at that segment online. It's a great thing online to be able to go back and look at something. And it was really interesting to see people in person and what their body language was like and what they were trying to say. And then you understood what people in New York or Idaho or Oregon would understand about this case. But I think when something's written up in the local newspaper, very often it's going to reflect, unfortunately, the biases and stereotypes of the local people, because they're selling newspapers locally, and it's going to reinforce that. And then, you know, I think it's difficult. And I have seen in the past the exact same story that's written locally, then in the Baltimore Sun or the Washington Post, or then getting into something nationally, and it's hard to imagine it's even the same story. It's so different. It's looked at in such different ways.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree that, you know, a regional lens can change a story. And as Stevenson points out, that the town was worried that their reputation was at stake for the news that they were putting out, which to me would have seemed like a red flag, but apparently not. So yeah, I think definitely the lens of an area, and I think it comes with the demographics of an area as well. There was another piece that I thought was interesting that I also hadn't considered was the foster care system. That I feel like we've all heard horror stories of the foster care system, and it seemed to play a part in some of these trials as well, in some of the stories that he was telling. And I didn't consider that as part of the injustice kind of steps. It was, again, not a piece of the puzzle I had considered before. And I'm not too sure if I have any answers on how to make that better. I don't think I've read up enough on that, but it's now something on my radar. And Courtney has put the link to the 60 seconds piece as well in chat.
Allie, if I may, there was a story shared in chat. I'll read that for others to reflect on. This comes from Stacy. She says, I agree, Allie, and last week there was a news blip about a young man who allegedly raped a woman in Florida, and my coworker's response was that he should be killed. And my response was, well, what if he didn't do it? What if he's not the perpetrator? What if they have the wrong guy? And that got her thinking. The book is reminding me to be aware of bias and possible untruth.
Agree. Yeah. I think, there are a lot of instances where I think we jump to conclusions. I also, I feel like that could be a hard case there. For sure. But I keep losing my train of thought. I'm sorry. I think too, instances like that where you are seeing these new clips and stuff, you do have to be aware that there might be information that they haven't shared. And I think the thing here, the comment was that the response was that he should be killed. And I think that's what the whole point of this discussion that we're talking about too is. Stevenson is leading us up to, and this is going to work into the next question as well, but Stevenson or not someone should live or die. So the fact that that was their first comment, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. My internet might be acting funny. I think we're all having internet issues tonight. But I don't know, something to consider as well when, that does seem to be an automatic response to some of the things that we hear, but Stevenson is saying, listen to that comment. Do we have the right to say that?
I'll add one other thing. We talked about poverty with those two women earlier on. Obviously, we're dealing with race and poverty and cultural differences and things like that. All those can contribute to the injustices and, how the justice system plays into not giving these individuals fair trials. We've discussed that in earlier chapters plenty, but just always something to think about, that everything is interconnected with that. And plays a huge role. All of the cases that he interweaves in, you know, he's showing those examples of those injustices.
I think that's
Courtney, I'll just jump off on that for a second, that I agree. There were several things that were, I mean, there's so many things that were particularly powerful in this section, I felt, but mentioning that poverty piece, in the mother chapter, that really stemming from a lack of access to healthcare, you know, to not, if this is, first of all, the death of the infant potentially being related to lack of prenatal care, and then just not, you know, there not being a relationship with a doctor who could vouch or something, you know, so any kind of backup for this woman who ends up on death row for having a stillborn baby is just, that's a clear example of that poverty in relationship to that lack of access to healthcare, and how it's criminalized ultimately.
I think if there's anything else anyone wants to add, if not, I can go ahead and move on. So the next question is, at this point, there is an obvious pattern Stevenson's writing, alternating chapters about Walter's case and the chapters on cases which illustrate different issues and cases. Why do you think Stevenson chose to write the story that way? And is this an effective way of storytelling? And I think Courtney kind of touched on this a little bit. I mean, I personally thought it was a really effective way of telling the stories, because he does weave them together in a way that they connect in certain aspects. They're still very much their own individual cases, but they still have a connecting factor and they still tie into Walter's story. But I think it just further proves that this isn't just a Walter only case. It isn't just an Alabama issue. It's a nationwide issue. The weaving of them all together just goes to show that this is happening everywhere for a variety of reasons. It's not just one thing that we can pinpoint. It's a whole system that is just not working. It just shows all the different injustices that can happen on all the different levels. I mean, we're talking about before at a child age, and then as a teenager, and then getting into the courtroom and what leads up to that. And it just, I feel, connects everything. And we're even seeing, once the trial has occurred, it's putting it as a whole package, and it's not one thing that can be fixed. It's the whole package needs fixed, essentially. And I again think that this manages to successfully build up to that question of, do we have the right to deal out death? Even though someone is guilty of a crime, do we have that right? And, you know, I think it makes us think we're all human. And how many times have we said, I'm human, I make mistakes, and then we're not giving that to other people. So I think it's kind of building up to asking ourselves that, and the ultimate kind of self-reflection on that.
Jacqueline, you can go ahead.
I thought it was very effective, because I thought that it gave you a sense of how much work they were doing on this case, and then there would be a long period of time when you had to wait. There'd be a big rush to get something in at a deadline, and then then nothing, then there would be nothing. And so by the end, when they were saying, okay, we've done this investigation, we know he didn't do it, but he better stay in prison for a few more months until we just get our ducks in a row here. And Bryan Stevenson was saying, enough. It's been 6 years. Every day is the time thing. I think this really drove home the idea of the time, how long it took working on all of these things, and how much hurry up and wait there was to it. And then there was somebody somewhere with it sitting on a desk doing nothing while Walter was in prison going through these things, knowing that he wasn't guilty, and just waiting. So I think it made us all kind of wait to see, give a little bit of an idea of what they went through in this case.
That is a really good point. I didn't consider the time aspect of it. I was actually surprised when he got to it's been 6 years. I was like, I hadn't even realized like that was how much time had passed. And I do agree that alternating that makes us wait a little for it. So that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Hillary, if you want to go.
I think I have to agree with you guys on this one. Does kind of paint a picture of what's going on in between these waiting periods, between trying to get everything worked out with Walter's case, and like with the little boy, he was working with him while he's waiting for everything to come through on Walter's end. So instead of saying just a whole several chapters of we were just waiting, he's telling you what he was doing in between the periods. And I think it does kind of paint a picture of what was going on.
Yeah, it kind of shows that the work is never done.
Right, even if shows he wasn't just working on this lone case. Mm-hmm. There were several going on in the background.
And that, I mean, he mentions that there's endless, and that, he wants to help them all, but
he can't, because I think at one point he was getting overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. And those were just the cases that he knew about.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing that. Renee said, by alternating stories, Stevenson has shown an example of one of the principles of true civility: be inclusive. I do think that Stevenson shows a bunch of different backgrounds as well through these cases. I think he hand selected cases that would show that this is from multiple backgrounds and multiple issues. So I do think that, he, out of all, I'm sure he has done hundreds of cases, and he chose these ones to showcase as well. Yeah, Sarah, the willingness of the state's attorney to leave Walter in prison after it is clear that he is innocent makes it clear how little Walter's life and humanity is valued by the system, and as well as the individual representations of it. Yeah. I think too, people are people until they're criminals, and then suddenly they're not people anymore. They're criminals, and there's this othering kind of aspect to it, just like suddenly they don't have the right to vote, and people look at them differently. People look at criminals differently. Once you're labeled that, even if it's proven at some point that you're not, you're still carry that label, as Stevenson made clear that it was almost like no one wanted to hear these stories because Walter was a criminal at that point. It didn't matter. Once he was a criminal, it was done. And Stevenson was worried that that would haunt him forever. So yeah, I don't think much care was given after the fact. Yeah, the voting issue is an example. Current civil rights issue, yeah. I don't know if a lot of people know that or not. Most of the time once you're convicted, you lose your vote to write, or your right to vote, not your vote to write, your right to vote. And a lot of people really have to fight to get that back. I have to look to see what all states that's implemented in. Is there any other comments about, the cases that Stevenson showcases or his writing techniques? I think it wasn't mentioned either that Stevenson's also is putting in his own life. It's not just these cases. He mixes in his own life as well. So to see some of his experiences, but we get to connect with him. It's not just, I'm going to school you on these issues. It's more of a person and things and how you might relate to these things.
I thought it was interesting in these chapters. He also included with the prison guard with Avery Jenkins, who, had him do a ton of things that he wasn't supposed to do, with having him strip searched and sign the book and all sorts of things. He included sort of this redemption story, even beyond just the redemption of these individuals who are incarcerated or the families involved. But after, I know we're going to discuss it a little bit about Avery Jenkins and his mental health issues he's dealing with, but he kind of gives this redemption story for this prison guard that notices and says, "Oh, I heard you were talking about the childcare system and the social issues, and I went through that, and understanding that word mitigation and just different things, and kind of giving him, or they went, oh, I get it now." And so for all of us, no matter what place we're at, even if there's the worst human being possible who, may not always be choosing anti-racist and maybe on that racist spectrum, there still is that potential for redemption. That's still that opportunity for growth. I just thought it was interesting. He also highlighted that as well. That was a good inclusion within that storytelling.
Yeah, I think it was a great way of showing that, on some level, we all have a lot to learn. But also that even maybe the most unwilling are willing to listen as well. And I think this was the same chapter that he talked about hope as well. So kind of tying in, like, even when we might feel the most hopeless, that there is still kind of a sense of hope that we can have. Also, I had to look up the definition of mitigation.
I did as well. And I actually, yay, thank you for putting that there. I had it ready as well.
I was like, I too do not know what he's talking about. It's one of those words that I feel like you hear a lot, especially, I feel like I've heard this in a lot of like more law-based like movies and stuff. Like you hear them saying it over and over again. And I was like, sure, I know what that means. I didn't know what it meant.
Do you want me to jump to question 4? Because I actually was going to address that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If no one else has anything to add.
Anyone
Yep.
has anything else? All right. Sorry, Ashley, make you highlight a different question to post. Okay, you're good. All right, let me grab my little notes because I never remember the names from these court cases. So Stevenson provides examples of defendants whose mental illnesses are never mentioned at trial. What are some of these examples? What are fair ways to try to treat individuals with mental health issues? So I'll just bring up Avery Jenkins again, because I had mentioned him briefly before, but he was the one who, just quick little reminder, who had sent those unintelligible letters that Stevenson had no idea what was going on, to the point that he finally went to go see what had happened. And Avery had gone through through a ton of crazy things through his life: abuse, neglect, foster system, just had a crazy life, and he kept not getting the help he needed. So it was just absolutely just heartbreaking to kind of see what was going on with the mental health crisis. Now, I think we're a little bit better now. We're identifying that invisible and less visible disabilities and things that people are dealing with. But Stevenson really tried to bring home the failures of the welfare system, and how it can lead to homelessness that Avery was dealing with, the exacerbated mental illness, the threats to public safety, and trying to balance that and kind of bring that mitigation, finding a way to alleviate the wrongs that are done to these individuals who aren't getting the help they need. And I'd love to hear other examples from people as well. I wanted to include a link to mental health first aid. I just completed a mental health first aid training this past week, and it does a really great job of kind of helping identify these issues early to get people the help they need without getting to the extent these individuals who are incarcerated are at. But I just added those to the chat. But Avery's example was one that really stuck out to me. I don't know if anyone else wants to share maybe some of the other examples that stuck out to them.
Sarah, I'd like to address this one.
Hi, yes. So I was just thinking about it from the lens of, especially with not just Avery, but also some of the other folks who really started, even back into earlier chapters, started their incarceration situations when they're juveniles, and thinking about it from that lens of the public school system and that work on the school to prison pipeline, that's where that it's the critical piece of identifying mental health concerns, and also understanding the impact of trauma and childhood trauma and all of those different pieces on a person's behavior. And kind of goes back to some things that I was talking about last week in, in a punitive mindset and a punitive system, not looking at the root of the behavior and coming to an understanding about how to repair harm that is done in a group or community, leads, directly to these situations where you have behavior that is a result of trauma or mental illness, or a combination of those two things, that is again criminalized and can result in, it's not changing the behavior also, for something from that kid perspective. If we don't understand what the root of the behavior is, there's no punishment in the world that's going to change the behavior. And if we're talking about discipline in terms of learning, how to grow, then that strictly punitive mindset is not helpful at all in that kind of work.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's crazy to see that connection. I know we've talked about it in previous discussions, of course, for those that were able to join us, just making that connection there. Does anyone else want to talk about any of the other examples in the text, or maybe actions that maybe we can take or that he was highlighting?
I know he talks about low income areas not having access to treatment. Mm-hmm. And the low income areas are also at a higher risk for police encounters, mm-hmm. Which is just not a good mixture. But I also think that there's still such stigmas around mental illnesses. And even, I feel like I hear stereotypes that for people with their disabilities that are not physically seen, that they're just lazy. Mm-hmm. I feel like we've seen this stigma. And I think, part of it is just trying to better understand mental illnesses and to just, just be better educated and make these resources available to these communities and have more information about mental illnesses. I feel like there's so many people who go through life with some sort of mental illness and don't even realize it sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to remember if there were any statistics shared about individuals dealing with mental illness in the book beyond incarceration. But I did pull a couple. 1 in 5 adults are diagnosed with a mental disorder every year. And almost half of American adults will experience a mental health challenge within their lifetime, which is incredibly significant. I mean, I think we have 24 people here, so 12 of us would be dealing with some type of mental health challenge at some point in our life. And that's not talking about how many loved ones that would be dealing with that. And I'd be curious to see how COVID affects that rate, because I'm sure we're all dealing with some mental health challenges or trying to combat that with the changes. And that doesn't include the increase in the rate with poverty or any familial issues that people are dealing with, and the rate, how high it is when you have family that is dealing with being incarcerated or deals with those issues, because it begins to compound. Does anyone want to talk about maybe George and his story. I thought his was interesting.
Courtney, will you recap the George?
Yeah,
I too do not remember everyone's name.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so George Daniel was the individual who ended up in a car accident, and afterwards he started dealing with hallucinations, nonsensical speech, and before his family could get him the help he needed, going to the hospital 3 days later, which is a little long, but he ended up leaving town, ended up on a bus, and gets kicked off the bus barefoot and all sorts of craziness, ends up in an altercation with a police officer who had issues in the past with being aggressive. And the police officer ends up getting shot in the stomach because they're rolling around and fighting. And he goes to jail for manslaughter. And there is a fake doctor who reports that he is faking his mental illness, which is absolutely crazy.
And the doctor had been working in a hospital for 8 years as a fake doctor.
Yep. And he had sentenced many other people to be faking it as well.
I don't know anything about how trial proceedings work now. I would hope that maybe they would be having more than one doctor evaluate people at this point, but if not, that might be something that would need to be considered.
I think the way that generally works as far as expert witnesses is that there's this opportunity for the opposing attorney to question the credentials of the witness, but of course in the situation where somebody's been at this for many years, farther away you get from the original situation, more difficult that must be to identify, because that's part of the credentials, and so it just builds, unfortunately. Another one of those yes, the way in which injustices can just build and compound.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Sarah. Hillary, do you want to remind us about Herbert?
Sure, I was trying to think of his name while we were talking about this. He was the actually one of the first guys that of Stevenson's who was put to death because he was in there because he had PTSD, and he had served in the military, developed that, and I believe he had unintentionally set a bomb at a woman's house and accidentally killed her. I can't think of all the details, but I was thinking with the PTSD, he really didn't get a chance to get the help he needed, like George did. They didn't get the chance to get him the help he deserved. Instead of getting the help, they just kind of dismissed the case and executed him.
I feel like that's a conversation I see being had a lot about even once these people are in jail and prisons, that they still aren't getting the help. How does that help? How does that fix anything? If you just lock people up and forget about it. That doesn't help them in the long run.
Yeah, it doesn't make it go away. It's just kind of saying, okay, just because you have this, it doesn't matter.
I think that goes to recognition of the, the purpose of, there's a conception that the ostensible purpose of prison, and again, this, this punitive mindset, is to change behavior, and to create, to make folks who are incarcerated into productive members of society. But then if you scratch just a little bit below the surface, and this is a great example of that, it's not what's really happening there, because we don't have all the pieces are not in place in order to truly be doing that. And that's a really significant one, is to understand what's actually happening with people, and get them help that's required in order, if that were really the purpose, to bring people back into society, and allow them to have a chance to become productive members. And there are all sorts of different pieces to that puzzle that we're setting up people to just return back into the system, as opposed to being healed, and to be able to have a chance to repair harm if they have done actual harm that's not part of the.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a mutual online who was talking recently about how her father had gotten out of prison after being in there for like 20 years or something like that. And that when he came out, he didn't know how to work really any technology. And we're now in a technology-based world. And how do you make people who are supposed to be working class citizens in a technology world if they haven't been taught all the technology?
Yeah, I mean, Allie, Ashley, a lot of the library folk can agree. We have a lot of people coming in who don't know how to use the computer, how to set up an email, how do they send in that resume. When everything is digital, how do they get that connections with the jobs that, they are even allowed to apply for, because they have to check, I've been incarcerated. It's just another layer to them getting back into the real world. But, it ends up being easier for them to get back into that cycle sometimes, which is just horrible. Or if someone is dealing with a mental health issue, they might get better help. Not that they're getting good help in prison, but if they can't deal with the society, Sarah, privatized for-profit prisons are not incentivized to rehabilitate and retrain. Absolutely.
I'm gonna quickly share a link. It's called Transforming the System. And it kind of just has some of their like suggested solutions to like the justice system, things that need changed. It's a little off of the question topic, but it deals with the overall topic. I think it's a really great starting point to look at just some of the issues, just multiple puzzle pieces that go into it.
All right, does anyone else have any thoughts regarding the question, or any of the mental health issues that may impact those that are incarcerated or lead to incarceration? Before we move to the next question, I will say again that mental health training is fantastic. If you get a chance, like I said, I was able to complete that mental health first aid training last week, really recently. And it was long, but there are so many great actions that you can take to help kind of get people at least earlier on in the process before they get to the point of potentially causing disruptions and things. And there's action plans and all sorts of great resources on that link. So if you get the chance, it's great. Help reduce the stigma. And hopefully it's all interconnected. So it's just good to think about.
All right, I will lead us into our last question then. It takes 6 years for the justice system to acknowledge Walter's innocence. What made it quicker to convict those in Stevenson's cases than to prove their innocence? And why does it take so much time, effort, and perseverance to get the legal system to confront its mistakes? You know, in Walter's case, it's just quickly accepted that he is guilty due to lies and false information, even though people looking at the case could quickly see that it didn't add up. And I do think that some of that was just blind faith in the local officials and, you know, the media that had played into that, to the point where even the DA was unopen to really hearing what Stevenson had to say. It also just seemed like a little care went into reviewing things. And Walter was just kind of seen as like an object to get something done. He wasn't a person. This wasn't years of his life gone. He was just a person, an item that was a solution to a problem that they were having, unfortunately. And we saw in several cases that, you know, the lawyers simply didn't care. They didn't fight for those clients, and they didn't provide the proper information or evidence to help their clients. We had it might have been in Avery's case where the lawyers were fighting over the money, or that might have been George's case.
George, yeah.
Yeah, they were fighting over the money and then stole George's wallet essentially and took his money. And I do think I feel like I've heard the stereotype that like lawyers are just in it for the money. The amount of times I was told growing up to go to law school because you'll make all the money. And, you know, is that a sense of like we have lawyers who don't care? How do we get lawyers to care about the case that they're working on? You know, I think that seemed to be a reoccurring issue in some of the cases that Stevenson was talking about, where that the proper information was just not given, or it was a blind faith in the things that were presented and no real investigation was put into it. As to why I think it takes longer for the law system to admit to the wrongdoings, I think just as a society as a whole, we have a hard time confronting our mistakes. We want to deflect and we want to make excuses and go on. And we see that with the judge who releases Walter. Basically, it's just like, okay, we're done here. Let's get this over with. And, you know, nothing else went with it. I think even the DA was like, that wasn't my case. Like there was excuses made. So I don't know why the legal system is so hesitant to review cases. I don't know if that has to deal with that once you're found guilty, you do get this criminal, and the system is supposed to made to keep society safe. I don't know. I think there just needs to be maybe even more openness on how things work.
Yeah, Annie has a great comment in the chat about this that goes back to that piece, the voter suppression piece, and connects that to the mentally ill piece as well, and the for-profit system of prisons, that the carceral system effectively removes a large number of voting persons, reducing legal challenges to a system that profits from harm and criminalizing the mentally ill. So again, it goes back to, you know, why we like to assume that there are that the reasons that we're told that things function the way that they do, that's why. But when you dig a little bit deeper and see where the motivations are coming from, they're not motivated to review cases. You know why? Because who's challenging them? Who's speaking up for the folks who are impacted disproportionately by these actions? And they're not motivated to to return folks to society. And even if that does happen, that not being able to vote piece effectively shuts down their voice. I mean, how much do we talk about the importance of voting, and that's how you participate in this democracy and affect change? Well, you can't if your voice is completely removed.
Yeah, who are they working for in the long run? I'm very sorry if you can hear my dog snacking on a bone. It's quite disgusting.
I think I'll include something, you know, locally. I know a little bit about what goes on with the local DA and the prosecutor's office and things like that. Those individuals in our area, specifically the DA, they're so overworked because the individuals in our area don't have the money for lawyers. They don't have the money to do that. And so while they're appointed a lawyer, that DA only gets so long and to review those cases, not giving any excuse, but just showing, you know, the system we have is not made for poor individuals. It's the capitalist ideal with this whole system is just so messed up. You know, I've had so many conversations about bonds and how, you know, just all of that. Being poor just makes you poor and puts you at risk of dealing with so many more issues. Yeah, we as a society have decided to label some humans, many who have a mental disability or illness, as undesirable. We throw humans out the streets at a young age, homeless, and a sadistic, twisted fate because they're abysmal on the street. We incarcerate them. Thanks, Stacey, for sharing. And it's all combined. All of this is just layers and layers, and we just end up in these cycles.
I think, you know, we all have the right to a lawyer, but do we all have the right to a lawyer that cares? Too. You can be appointed someone who doesn't give a jack crap what happens to you. I've seen the issues with bonds as well. You know, that's also a very targeting poor communities. You know, to put a bond on people when they go to jail and to release them if they have the money, basically. You're only worthy of going out and living your life if you have enough money to do so.
various fines and penalties are the same way. They should be with you, not a set number, which then is a lot larger for poorer individuals. And I know this is an aside, but it all, like I said, is interconnected. If I get strapped with a $200 fine for littering, I'm sure a lot of us in this area are living on the poor end of the spectrum due to the cost of living. You know, that's going to drastically affect me. Whereas the guy with that third summer home, he can do whatever he wants. And it drastically impacts the individuals we're talking about. Does anybody else have any thoughts? I can't see all the cameras, so sometimes. We're almost to the end of the book. How does everyone feel? We're coming to the end of the conversation. This is an informal question. How is everyone feeling regarding this journey?
Wow, indeed. I will say this has been a quick read. I don't mean like, I don't know how to explain what I mean. I guess it's just been so, he writes it so well. And he mixes so many good elements, well, in the bad elements, but he mixes in so many good things that just really work to keep you really into the story. He has a great way of creating a mixture to showcase the injustices, but also like how we all can connect to them. Yeah, it's powerful and incredibly compelling book. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jackie. Thank you, Allie.
Okay. Before I read this book, I had been reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, and it took me weeks to read it. And I'm a fast reader. I usually read something in a couple of days. But I had to keep putting it down and thinking about it. There were so many things in it that just seemed so profound and so weighty. And this book, for me at least, gave some hope that there are people who are working on these things, that are aware of them, that are studying them and doing things about them. And I thought it was a hopeful book, or so far, at least.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stevenson definitely, you know, he talks about that sense of hope, and at times where he felt slightly hopeless, but there were times of hope. And, you know, he's bringing light to it. I know, to me, I said at the beginning that, sorry, my cat is being weird. He said at the beginning that, I said at the beginning that I'm not super, I guess, educated on how the law works and aspects of that. And I feel like he does put it in a way that, like, I can understand. I didn't go to law school. I didn't have to go to law school to understand the injustices that are happening. And he really, I think, showcases all these different points, because I think, like, I know injustice and, like, I think of laws as injustice, but these other parts of it that I hadn't considered, like the media and the foster care and education and all those other things, I think he did a really good job at you know, showcasing every part that goes into it too.
Any other thoughts before we close for our discussion tonight? All right, going once, going twice. All right, I think we're done. Allie?
We will, the recording will be up within a day or two. So if you're interested in sharing it, friends and family, and we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about the book as a whole. And let me go ahead and share. I'm going to share the Anthony Ray Hinton link. Hillary, do you have a different link? I have the one from Facebook. Is there a different one that I should be?
I have the one to share to register through.
Okay.
If you would like me to send that to you in a separate email, and you can just send it out to everyone so they can see it, or I can go ahead and drop it in the chat right now.
Yeah, you can just go ahead and put it in the chat.
Okay, I didn't want to do it without anyone's permission.
If anyone ever has any resources to share, feel free to share it in the chat. You know, always looking for more reading material. But yeah, the Anthony Ray Hinton event, and anyone who has read to the end of the book, I do believe that he is mentioned in the end of Just Mercy. He's one of the ones that Bryan Stevenson, you know, works with. So there is that. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about the book as a whole. And then we'll be talking about the movie after that. If you need to get a copy of the movie, you can get it through the library. I think you can get it on most streaming services as well. So if you're interested in that, my cat feels the need to join this discussion as well. So yeah, that is, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. You know, thanks for being here, having these discussions, and just keep doing the good work. That's all I got. So I hope everyone has a good night. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.